This is the Wisdom Podcast.
Welcome to the Wisdom Podcast. My name's Daniel Aiken, and today we meet Pascal Auclair, a teacher in the Theravada Buddhist tradition. Pascal tells us how at 25 he learned that he was HIV positive, and how at this point he felt certain he would not live to the age of 40. It was with this sense of time as precious he set out to go to Asia and discovered Buddhist meditation practice. Pascal, who is in good health today, tells about his inspirations along the Buddhist path. He also reflects powerfully on the meeting of Dharma practice and social justice. So I hope you enjoy the conversation. Here is Pascal. Thank you for joining us on the Wisdom Podcast.
Thanks for having me. Thanks.
Thank you.
It's exciting.
Great.
I don't know what's going to happen.
I think it'll be fun. And so what I wanted to do is start from the beginning. So I'm always interested in why people start their spiritual journey. And so I was wondering what started your journey.
I have two answers that can work both. So I'll try both on them, and you'll tell me what you think. Let's start with how I found myself in the first time in a meditation retreat, in a monastery. So I was traveling with my partner in Asia, and we had been traveling for 2 or 3 months. I can't remember now, but I really wanted to be alone for a few days. Mm-hmm. And he wanted us to stay together, which made total sense, you know? So I was saying, why don't you go to the next place for a couple of days, and then I'll join you and you can show me around. And no, we came together, we're staying together. And I remember being in the south of Thailand and meeting an American traveler with a backpack. And she told us that there was a monastery just very close by, which was Buddhadasa Bhikkhu's monastery. Okay. He was dead by that time, but that was his monastery in the south of Thailand. And she said, you can do 10 days of silence. And I thought, oh my God, I'm going to be alone, but he's going to be with me. So we're all going to get what we want, So I said to my partner, would you do that? It's a kind of a cultural thing to do,
Yeah.
And he agreed, he was into it.
Yeah. So
we went in and I did find the space I needed, the silence. Yeah. It was really good, but also much more than, in a way, what I expected or was looking for at that particular moment, I think. And, I remember being hit by one of the first talk on the Four Noble Truths, and how deeply it reached. And also similarly, also as much touched by the practice itself of just sitting and paying attention, and the concentration aspect, but also kind of intimacy with reality. And I have to say that, I'll say that. For me, from my point of view of Western white gay male, there was there was an aspect of it being exotic for me because I was in the jungle of Thailand, and the monastics with their, robe with one shoulder showing, and there was something.
Did you say exotic or?
Both exotic and erotic.
Yeah. At both at the same
that really
time.
caught my attention. So, that's the truth of it.
Yeah.
There was something very beautiful about the culture and about the, something very central about the jungle and the night and the sky and the capacity to be there and listen.
So it's a very alive experience for you.
Yeah, I still have very kind of,
vivid.
Images, impressions of that.
So was that so you wanted a bit of me time And so that was a 10-day silent retreat. That's a lot of me time. Right?
Yeah,
a lot of time.
But you know, right there at the end of the retreat, I remember somebody mentioning the 3-month retreat at IMS. Mm-hmm. And I'm from Montreal, which is, 6 hours driving from here at IMS. And right away I thought, wow, that's my next trip. My next trip is not traveling in another country or continent. My next trip is that 3 month.
Wow.
And I think less than 2 years, maybe a year after I was starting the 3 month.
So you came back, and so before you went on this 10-day retreat, were you interested in Buddhism, interested in meditation, or you were just a tourist in
Yeah, we were
Thailand?
traveling. I think there was something. With Anthony, we had gone to ashrams. We had done a few things, you know, but never something that could say had really touched me. But being there in the monastery, I really felt like home. Not the physical location, but the philosophy, the practices. Really felt, wow, I found some home. I was not even sure I was looking for it.
Do you remember the time when that occurred to you, or was it a more, it was the whole experience? Or was there a particular moment when you said, wow?
Well, there was, in terms of like the teaching, there was definitely like the first noble truth. You know, there is suffering or there is stress, or like the way it was expressed, that it was not my fault or somebody else's fault, that shit happened. You know? That the nature of this reality was not able to completely be flowing or satisfying, or, you know, that there was something being pointed there that was resonating, like that's a feeling of home there. And in the practices, I think the capacity to calm one's mind, to me, was very surprising. And sometimes I say that in my teaching, that, you know, like so I'm sitting there, and they're basically, what I'm hearing is they're saying, you want to become more wise. Why wouldn't you pay attention to your nose? You know, it's a kind of a surprising suggestion, you know, because I could sit there and think about myself and my trouble, and, you know, and they say, no, let this go for a little while and just pay attention to the air coming in and out at your nostrils, you know. And my idea is like, wow, I would never have thought to look at wisdom this way, you know, in that direction.
How could the solution to all my suffering be
at my nose?
At my nose.
At my nostrils. So...
wow.
So that's only the first story.
That's the first story.
The other one, kind of a deeper story, I think, that was going on at the time is I think I was 27, and a year and a half before that, I had learned when I was 25 that I was HIV positive. And the year I learned that, there was no medication that was the cocktail or tree therapy. Is that the way you say it in English? It was not available. So basically, I had just learned a year and a half before that I was about to die, and die in a pretty dramatic way, you know, with, you know, in a difficult way, probably. So, you know, there had been a shock to the whole system, and, you know, I had been shaken to the core. So I think that made me available for the teaching also.
And when that was before you were traveling in Thailand, is that right? Or after?
Yeah, that was before the trip to Thailand, like a year and a half before.
And so then you had a real experience of facing death, your own death.
Yeah. Wow. You know, actually, if I go back to being in the doctor's office that day, so that's a year and a half before learning meditation, this was a kind of an encounter with the heavenly messengers, you know. So when I heard the story of the 4 heavenly messenger, my thought was, oh, I know this really well. I know I had that same night as the Buddha had, you know. Without the 4th one came later, but the 3 first. In the doctor's office, I basically was told, you think you're eternal, you think you're, you know, youthful and healthy forever, but you just moved in with death, you know, aging and sickness.
And so you confronted death. Not only death is certain, but it was coming soon, you thought, right?
Yeah. I mean, at that time I was given 8 years, but when you're 25, and also I had seen friends or acquaintances get sick and die, so the images were pretty strong.
So at that time you didn't have these teachings, so what were you drawing on to sort of handle that, facing that prospect?
That's a really good question.
Like, what was your refuge back then?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I remember, again, in the doctor's office, the doctor saying this, the test came back positive. And first I said, it's not possible. Denial just based on the circumstances I had been in. But I remember, like, once I really understood, like, the way he was looking at me and saying, no, it's true. Like, once I got, okay, this is real, I remember there was a little flash of something in my mind that it was almost like saying something like, okay, let's take this on. Yeah. This is going to be like a whole trip, this is a huge adventure, but let's take it on.
Let's face this.
Because it's happening, Yeah. I remember having that idea cross my mind. And of course, after, it didn't stay that strong,
Of course. Yeah.
After, there was a lot of confusion and maybe depression that followed in the months after. But there was this possibility that appeared in my mind during the conversation that I could actually take this on and,
It'd be something to face, something to find yourself in, or meaning, or something like that.
Yeah, like even like that could be a vehicle. I don't never know how to say this in English. Yeah. Rather than
something that happens to you.
Yeah, like that holds a lot of potential. That's going to be dramatic and difficult, but there's a lot of potential. There was an intuition of that.
That's just like, it's this idea of turning these problems in our life into like the soil for our spiritual growth. Like, was it like that, or was it more like, no, I'm just going to take this on? Or?
Yeah, I think it was like that, but not that well articulated. Just kind of an intuition that there was a way that one could actually take this on and be there for that.
And then, so there was that moment there, a pivotal moment in your life where you face death and your own mortality. And then 1.5 years later is when you start meditation. And in between there, you've gone on this journey to Thailand.
Yeah.
And so was that trip to Thailand, was that hedonistic, like, I want to enjoy life, or was that searching for answers to the life?
I think there was searching for answers, but it was not, again, conscious. The thing that I knew of was there was something in me that was saying, I'm not going to let this decide, like, I'm going to do what I want to do. And with my partner at the time, we wanted to go to Asia. So I remember being very firm inside of me and thinking, I'm actually going to Asia.
Yes.
Like, life, like, I'm not going to let this, I don't know how wise it was. I think it turned out to be a wise move.
Fine, right?
But in terms of health, or, for somebody with a weakened immune system, that to go to another region of the world where, things are different.
At that stage, were you still thinking 8 years, or was was that the thing in your mind? Was
the way
what the doctors were telling you?
The way I could done. I think it's at that time that the tree therapy came in, the cocktail therapy, and so there was a wave of hope suddenly. If I remember well, there was like, whoa, we discovered this is going to change. But in my mind, the impression had been made really strong that I would not experience being 40 years old.
Yeah.
This was very clear in my mind. That was not going to happen. And so, Yeah, there was that. And so I imagine that you were talking about how you wanted to make the decisions for what you did with your time, because time is precious for you. You're very that's very clear for you. Yeah.
And so you're on this search and you find, and then you're like, no, I need some time for myself. And then you find this, and your partner's saying, well, we went on this trip together.
Yeah.
And then you find this solution. Oh, a 10-day silent retreat.
That was kind of how would you say it in English? Punctual? Just for
very,
that moment, it was like, get me out of the space alone. And I'm saying this with lots of respect for my partner, because great guy.
Yeah.
Most beautiful being.
Yeah. Well, I think anyone who's traveled with someone overseas for a long period of time knows that feeling. Yeah. And so I'm interested. So then that retreat, what was that like? What were you doing day to day? Did you have much time with the monks? Were you able to communicate them and tell them, this is my situation, this is what I'm looking for?
Yeah, we didn't talk about this specifically, and I don't remember actually I remember having a conversation with Ajahn Po, but I remember more like the technique, the Dharma talks, you know, the teachings being very impactful for me. There was another thing also that in a way was touching. There was one very courageous young Japanese man who was a traveler sitting on the retreat, and I think a couple of years earlier he had had an accident at work and he had lost his sight. And so they asked me, I don't know how I ended up with this task, but maybe I volunteered, I can't remember, but I ended up helping him at every sit or walk or at mealtime, helping him find his way to the Dharma hall and so there was something about attending to another human being and just offering one's arm, you know, so to help, you know, that was also like a big teaching. It was very dharmic, you know, like to actually. I was still having the silence I needed. But then I was
having that contact with someone and helping someone.
Yeah, in a very, very simple way, but it was constant for the whole week. Every time we were moving from point A to point B, I had to show up and offer my elbow, you know, for him to...
He's blind, but this person is turning up and in this silent space.
Yeah, and very courageous. He was traveling alone in Thailand with his backpack. And I remember that also had a strong impact on me, like how we can be there for each other, but also how our body can become the body of somebody else or be in service.
And here's someone else who was also facing adversity, right?
Yeah.
And courage and but still needing support, right?
Yeah.
So there's like this courage, but at the same time, the arms out, and some stranger who becomes not a stranger, after this. That's beautiful, really beautiful.
Yeah. And another memory, I have many memories of that time apparently coming up, but my partner, hold on, how do I want to say this? So one thing that touched me in this retreat was how the monks were talking about respect for elders, for parents, for employers. There was many things that were not part of the culture I had been in, you know, where I remember sitting there and thinking, I've never heard that, being thankful to or grateful to employers like you.
Yes.
I mean, that's how far I was.
They should be great to me.
Exactly. To me. Or to parents even. And I remember being touched by this. We were sending metta in different directions, you know, and there was directions that were, or relationships that were surprising to me. Like I had missed this in my culture. Somehow the youth I was hanging out with and were not valuing this, and I had taken this on. But they were suggesting something else. And my partner was from a family of I forget now if there were 7 or 8, but a large family. And the mom, when he was 3 years old, had left the house, had kind of abandoned the family, and they had never seen her again. They had tried to get in contact with her, and she had refused to see them again. So there was a big struggle in him. His father had been really there, taking care of them, and he had immense gratitude for his father taking care of the whole family. But with his mom, it was very difficult, and he had a conversation with Ajahn Po, the abbot there, and Ajahn had said, you know, you could spend the whole rest of the week here just thinking of all the little things your mom did for you to give you life and to support you as she was pregnant. And in the first 3 years of your life, you know, like feeding you and washing you and caring, making you be safe. You would not have enough of the whole week to actually think of all the instances where she cared for you. And I remember him being so deeply touched and how it transformed his Ajahn Po was saying, she gave you life. You know,
Yeah.
you could carry her on your back. This is an old Buddhist image. You could carry her on your back for the rest of your life. You could never repay what she's given to you. And for him, it was a really profound transformation of the accessing gratitude for the life he was giving by his mother, you know.
That's an amazing story, because it's powerful the way we think of people, right?
Yeah.
And the link between the way we think or conceive of people and how we feel towards them.
Yeah, the perceptions and thoughts we have. And
so this ascertainment. He'd thought about his mother, and those thoughts were defined by a particular event.
Yeah.
And the monk had said, here's another way about thinking about your mother.
Yeah.
And that totally transformed the way he was allowed to feel towards her.
Yeah.
It's so profound.
And for me, I had like a very much, how to say, this living experience of this, because we had been together for several years, and I knew how difficult this was, and I could see how healing it was for him to hold this. And this was Buddhism doing this. This was Ajahn Po and the Buddhist wisdom that was, you know, making this transformation possible. So that was impressive for me.
And you so you were impressed by the Buddhist teachings from seeing someone who you were very familiar with coming in and then being transformed by this wisdom.
Yeah, somebody I loved very much who was suffering, you know, in an aspect of their life, you know, and that practice.
Yeah. Did you feel a similar effect on yourself, or was that more? It was more a contrast for your partner.
Yeah, his story was particular to, you know, that aspect. For me, it was. For me, touching, for example, concentration, I didn't know about concentration, but the state where the hindrances, you know, the desire and doubt and like are at bay and the mind is protected. I remember having an experience of, you know, concentration during this retreat, and that was impactful also. Wow, there's a way that the mind can be kind of non-struggling with any part of the experience and be really in very, very close contact that is balanced with what's happening. This impressed me a lot.
So you got a taste of that.
Yeah.
This retreat. Nice.
You know, I had heard a lot, like we're using only 10% of our brain. You know, when I was a kid, this is one thing that I would hear often, and it was very mysterious to me. Wow, 90% is unknown. And what form does it take? What? And I remember having this experience there and thinking, oh, I just touched that.
Yes.
That's another area of the brain or the human experience that I didn't know about.
Yeah.
You know.
What techniques were you doing on this retreat to get touch those spaces?
This one was there was anapanasati, so attention at the nostril, and they were actually teaching a very sweet little technique that I think it was they gave us a little booklet that was for kids, where there was the analogy of water buffalo, I think, and it was a little child who was a shepherd or something like that, like helping bring the water buffaloes from the pasture to the swamp or something like this. And it was basically showing you how to follow the breath from the nostril when it comes in and following it down to the belly and back. So kind of accompanying the breath like this. And I remember like following exactly the little images of the ox or water buffalo and doing it in a very childlike way, naive, also playful, and it working really well. You know?
Yeah, it seemed to have worked. Got a nice taste for nice results. Wow. Well, that sounds like a very rich experience, and so it makes sense that then you came back home and you wanted to continue, and that was through the 3-month retreat at IMS.
Yeah. And I called at IMS when I came back, and they said, "Oh, you have to." There was a requirements, you know, you had to
prerequisites.
Yeah. And I remember I said, "Oh, okay. I'm looking now. I can see there's a retreat. Then I'll do this one because I really want to get into the 3 months." And they said, "Oh, but this retreat is a little different from our usual retreat. It's taught by a teacher that gives ongoing instructions." And I said, "Oh, I love instructions." And they were like, "Yeah, but you understand it's ongoing instructions." And And I was saying like, yeah, ongoing instructions, great. And okay, so you really understand. Later, I understood what they meant. The retreat was held by Ruth Dennison, who's not alive anymore, but one of our great, in this tradition, great teacher and elder. And it was a very different kind of retreat that one would do with Ruth, which I actually really loved and was, again, very impressed by her. I came from the world of theater, and there was something about her and her exploration which was very sense awareness based. Like I remember being in the forest at IMS and being on my fours with all the other retreatants and walking, on our fours. Can you feel the earth? Can you feel the...
Is this what ongoing instructions were supposed to imply?
That was one of them. Ongoing meant she was basically always... Ruth was pretty much always talking,
Teaching, yeah.
And giving ongoing instructions, and so...
So very different to your time in Thailand.
Yeah, very, very different, but...
What was she teaching? What sort of practice was she teaching? I thought she taught jhanas and things like that, but was it different?
The work I did with her and the way I remember it, of course, was very much about sensory awareness. Mm-hmm. Okay. So, we were spending time being aware, conscious of seeing, conscious of hearing, touching. We would dance in the hall together, and and there was the whole of the Dharma was there, the whole of the Eightfold Path, and the whole of the, the Sila, the ethics. Yeah. I mean, she was teaching a full path, but it was a lot through movement and presence in the body.
So your other meditation in Thailand was very focused on the breath, and you can get a very withdrawal from the senses can come from that, right? So
yeah,
it's like a withdrawal.
Yeah.
And then you can touch those spaces that you talked about. And this was almost the opposite, right?
Opening to the senses, to life.
But still possible to touch those same spaces. So how would you compare and contrast the experiences from those different methods?
Yeah. And there's been many different other methods later, always in the Theravada kind of Vipassana world. But, when I did the teacher training with both Jack Kornfield and Joseph Goldstein and many other teachers, I remember Jack always saying, the Dharma is like a jewel, and there's so many facets, so many techniques, so many expression, and Jack is really interested in that, how, Thich Nhat Hanh wisdom is manifesting, and how other versions of how it can get political and how it can get this and that. And so I think in a way, practicing like many other Westerners, not being in a village with one teacher, but moving from teacher to teacher, I was being exposed to many different styles of practice is really good. If one doesn't get totally lost, but the different jewels or facets of the jewels are revealed. And so comparing these two particular practices, in both cases I was also very new to practice, so to me that was all like Walt Disney or Harry Potter didn't exist that time, but it was very much like going to the sorcerer's school, and meeting all these different characters and exploring.
That's a nice way to put it. I like that.
And then after there was Goenka Kaji,
Oh, so did you do a retreat with Goenka
Yeah,
Kaji?
I was curious to go practice with him, and and so many other beautiful voices. And so sometimes it's anicca comes to the foreground, the impermanence of things. Sometimes the heart comes to the foreground. Sometimes the playfulness, sometimes the discipline. And that it fits with my personality. I like to try different versions and meet characters is something I really like.
That's cool, right? Yeah, that's very cool. Who are some of the characters? Like it says on your bio, I was reading, it said mentored mentored by Jack Cornfield and Joseph Goldstein. And I was wondering about this word, it was an interesting choice of word, mentored.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to know what being mentored meant for you.
Yeah.
How do you, I guess, what does that mean, being mentored?
It meant spending a certain amount of quality time with these guys, and it meant feeling seen by them. I think, feeling seen and encouraged and accompanied by them in very skillful ways. So it felt in a way very personal, but also I was part of a teacher training program, where there was 24 of us. That was a large group. And so, and especially with Jack and Joseph, to me, have such different personality and ways to express the Dharma, that being mentor meant allowing myself to be really touched by the way they understand and express the Dharma, and many forms, like having conversations over a meal, but hearing their talks, but also being there. That's such a privileged thing to be able to do, was to sit there for many hours watching them meeting individually other retreatants, and seeing how the kind of relationships and tools they bring in the encounter with retreatants.
Nice.
Yeah.
When I read that, I was thinking about my own teachers, and I was thinking, that captures what a good teacher does. It wouldn't be right to say my teachers taught me. To say that they mentored me. It's nice, and what you're expressing. Yeah, I can feel that. That's a good. So then, when you teach now, are you feeling like you're also doing that role of mentoring, or how do you? What's the role of a teacher for you? You've encountered all these people and all these teachers in, Buddhism in the modern day, or in the West, and all over the world, I guess. What's the role of a teacher in your eyes?
Yeah, it's a deep question. It actually touches me a lot just to hear. The first thing that comes to mind is the amazing privilege to be given a voice, and also given trust. I see it first and foremost, I think, as a spiritual friend. Like, I'm invited to be a spiritual friend. And I'm getting silent. Because I think this is a very precious rapport that one has with people in this field, and I also want to do this really well. So as I'm talking to you, I'm aware of wow, this is a big responsibility. It's a privilege, but also an amazing responsibility. And it's done very imperfectly.
Yeah.
So just to bring some ease to my mind right now. And it's
not
done.
From what I hear. I hear it's done perfectly.
But it's basically I teach a lot of retreats. So my understanding is that I'm invited to create a safe environment that will be favorable for the healing of the heart or the opening of the mind, and what is the skill of creating that kind of space, where one's own process can unfold naturally within the silence and nature and time, but also just enough input to inspire, encourage, accompany, maybe highlight certain things, make suggestions, but I'm not very into a prescription, you're going to do this is that's not my way. My way is more like, I'm interested, how is it for you? What's happening for you? What is your field of interest? What is your way? And how maybe I can make little suggestion, highlight things.
So you're supporting their own discovery. Yeah.
And something that I think I'm told that I do easily two things. and that it's a joy for me to do, and I can recognize this is one thing, is giving the permission for people to be who they are, and to be where they are. You know, that whatever is happening is totally okay. You know, so if we do metta and somebody gets really reactive and they don't feel the friendliness, it's totally okay. You know, like to make the field of experience. You know,
we can have metta towards the unfriendly feelings.
Exactly. But you know, like any version of the retreat unfolding is good and can be met, maybe. You know, so first making it very possible for people to be who they are and feel what they feel and allow the things to go how they go. And the other thing is, I think my mandate is that my function is also to reflect in people their strength, because often they can't see it. And that's something that I really like to do. It's to listen to somebody and see their either beauty or their capacity or and so they might be reporting, oh my God, this doesn't go, this doesn't work. And I say, but it's amazing that you're still here and you're pretty clear about the different movements of the mind, you know, and you know, there's a caring, the way you talk about whatever I see, I love to reflect. And I can, my sense over 10 years of teaching now is that it's actually a good pedagogical tool.
Pedagogical, for
you.
sure.
It's actually onward leading, you know.
Yeah. Did that way of teaching come naturally? Is it like that part of your personality, or is that something you learned over the 10 years?
Probably a bit of both. I think there's something in this personality. And maybe I've seen my teacher do this, use that tool. And
do you have a particular teacher in mind when you say teacher, or you have teachers?
My grandmother comes to mind.
Wow. Yes.
She might be one
of the best teachers in the world.
Sometimes I feel like, wow, I got most of my transmissions from her. You know, she's maybe my root guru, as they would say.
Tell us about that.
So she her name, I called her Mimi Auclair, and she had many kids. Like she gave birth 11 times and adopted the 12th one. And she was very, very loving and playful. So I remember one time, I'll give you just a few impressions again, but I remember one time, I always thought she really particularly loved me, you know, like of all my more than 20 cousins in the family, because
she made you feel special, right?
Yeah, I've really felt like she really loves me particularly. And one day we were with her and two of my cousins, and I just noticed that, wow, they feel the same way as I do. You know, that's what archetypal grandmothers will do. You know, but I remember being shocked by this, but not. It was not bringing distress, or like I was not falling from something. You know, it was just making her even more powerful in my eyes. Wow, she can make me feel this, and she can make maybe Elizabeth or Chantal feel the same. Wow, what an amazing, like one can do this. This was a really impressive thing to notice. And then her playfulness. I was earlier in the last retreat that finished a couple of days ago, I just told that little story about her. And I was saying, first she was a big woman, and she had the beard, white, strong beard that she would shave, and she was absolutely beautiful, like absolutely beautiful, like physically beautiful, and again very playful. So there's this playful, joyful woman, and sometimes we would go under the table at her house, a number of me and my cousins, with a little recording machine, and we would say, "Meme, Meme, fart." And she would make a beautiful fart.
She had many special powers.
Like really round, like you know these clouds. How do they call these clouds? cumulus stratus, I think, like really round, bubbly. And then we would record and come on top of the table and then play the fart. And she would laugh and she would say, "Oh, your Mimi, she just farted for you." Oh, and she would laugh.
How generous, right?
Yeah. Thank you for the... I'm happy you understand what I'm talking about. And so that was a lot of her, and she was many more things, you know. She, when I was traveling in Asia, and so maybe back to the time of the first retreat, I would go to general post offices, you know, in Bangkok and in Delhi, and there was almost always I have flashes of Kathmandu and other places where I would go to the general post office and I would find a letter in the section of Auclair, Pascal, and there would be, usually it would be the back cover of some kind of Kleenex or cereal box, you know, that she would cut and reuse, and I would open it and inside there would be something like, my butterfly dash, it's your meme dash, 3 a.m. dash, she's thinking of you dash, you're a butterfly, fly, and that's it, you know.
Wow.
And even I have memory. I was telling you this. I remember sitting the 3 month here and getting letters from her. So I would go and there would be this thing with what we call in my family moving tape, like the tape you use to put on boxes. Because I come from a truckers family with movers and truckers, and so we had a lot of this kind of tape.
Brown sort of,
so she would put this around like the back of the Kleenex box letter, you know. And so I would get these letters. One time at Spirit Rock in California, I was telling that story. And a few months later, I'm at home, I go in my mailbox, and there's a letter from Spirit Rock. And so I opened the letter from Spirit Rock, and inside there's a cardboard with movers tape with butterflies on it. And I open it, and it's somebody from the south of France, Dharma Seed. You know, Dharma Seed is everywhere in the universe. And so anyway, she had listened to the talk given at Spirit Rock. One night I was replacing the Jack on his Monday night class. So I told this story. This woman, I think in the south of France, heard it, wrote a letter, made a letter like Meme's, sent it to Spirit Rock, sent it to me, and it was such a beautiful moment to open the letter and see like, wow.
So you are carrying on that lineage of inspiration.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking. I'm continuing your work, Mimi, you know.
Fantastic.
Through the Buddhist lens.
Exactly.
Use what you can.
She would be really happy, I'm sure.
Uh-huh.
Amazing. That's beautiful. It's beautiful to recognize those inspirations and teachers in our life. We have so many teachers, right?
Yeah.
And I was wondering, so a lot of your teachers, of course, your grandmother and your Vipassana teachers, have you had contact with many other traditions? You mentioned Kathmandu and...
No. But I have to tell you this, just in case it's interesting. The first time I was at IMS, I spent a lot of time at IMS, in the basement with staff, and we were watching a Canadian National Film Board documentary on Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche. I think it was a movie made by our French friend.
Mathieu Ricard.
And I had never seen this teacher, but when he appeared on the screen and he was moving, and I started crying because it made me think of my grandmother. I was looking at the way he was moving his hands. I was thinking, wow, this is like my grandmother was moving like this, and people were bringing these white scarves, you know. I don't know that tradition really well. It's a beautiful tradition, but and the love that was between teacher and students, you know, and the devotion and I was feeling, that's the first time I thought, my root guru was Meme, you know, because I see what is the relationship with a root guru, you know.
And you know how, you know, Khyentse Rinpoche, Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, many of his students have said he had that special ability of making everyone feel like they were the most special person to him. Just like your
So maybe I was recognizing something like this, you know, even through the documentary.
And maybe it's like a quality of these special people. They have that quality. Very nice.
So otherwise, Never sat a Tibetan retreat, never sat a Zen retreat, or maybe read a few books here and there. But I remember talking one time, if I remember well, with Guy Armstrong and Joseph Goldstein and maybe Carol Wilson, who have been the people I've reported to mostly in my long retreats. You know, they're my long retreat teachers. So I think I was having a conversation with them and saying it's strange that I consider myself a curious person, you know, but why did I
I think that's the bowling.
So I consider myself a curious person. Why haven't I never gone to sit with Tibetan teacher, for example, or in that lineage? And Guy and maybe Joseph were saying, but we went and got there. What was needed was lacking in our lineage, you know, like the openness of the mind, you know, and other qualities. But saying we did that for you in a way. So maybe if you had come before we had gone to teach with these amazing teachers, to sit rather and learn from these amazing teachers, maybe you would have needed to go. But there was some qualities that were not in our lineage that we brought.
They brought in. How interesting. That's interesting. And because you have had that diversity within your own tradition as well. Yeah. So that's interesting.
And one other thing is, it's almost 20 years now of practice, but it's very fresh to me. It's very, like, I feel like I'm just getting into it, you know. It's very juicy for me. I don't feel, blasé or, you know, like, these tools are really useful to me, and I feel like I'm developing, and it's very juicy.
Wow. So what does, after 20 years and after all this diversity, what does a meditation practice look like for you? Like, what's your morning look like? I love asking that question. Yeah. I love speaking to yogis and saying, what's your morning? What do you do?
For me, it's more the afternoon. You want to know about? Yeah. But no, in the morning, often when I'm at home, in the morning, I'll be kind of doing administrative work, you know, like organizing retreats and answering emails and attending to this kind of stuff. And I do this for I like to be efficient, you know, so I start the day, I do the efficient things. I feel like I've been
stuff done.
Exactly. And then in the afternoon, it opens up. So often it will be that I will have 2 to 5 hours that opens up. And to me, it's then I'm a contemplative, you know, and I don't know exactly what form it'll take, or it varies. But it could be, sitting or walking in nature, or often I end up just sitting on the ground with my back to my sofa, you know, like kind of legs stretched and just hanging out, you know, and it's very clear to me that I'm practicing, you know, but it's not the form with the crossed leg, the very formal. But it's very formal internally in a way. So, if something has happened in the last day that needs processing, maybe the heart will attend to that. You know, like, oh, this was said, or this was not said, or oh, there's a heaviness around that, or oh, there's some shame. This was not said, you know, in the most careful manner, or there was a lack of consideration here from another person or from me, you know. Yeah. And so maybe I'll process a few things like that, you know, revisit my actions and words, or absence of them.
Like a checking in.
Yeah. And then it might clear up, and then maybe the mind will become more quiet and the more samatha, calming, or maybe more investigative if there's something that is alive. And and it could be through just the quality of the mind, heart, but it could be through seeing, you know, it could be any doorway.
So you use different senses.
Yeah. You know, like so now in this room it's a little cold. Yes. So that would probably be something when I would attend to, like the experience of cold, you know, and
so you use all the senses and even reflection on that. the mind reflecting on the past activities and seeing what comes up.
Yeah, and noticing, you know, if the mind gets a little obsessed, or if it's able to inquire in a way that is open, not kind of clingy or obsessive in some ways, or compulsive, but
a nice practice. And I noticed, like, actually you mentioned like you're quite interested in social justice, and so how does your practice off the cushion, or once out in the world, what does your practice look like there? And what do you hope it to be?
So my current kind of thoughts, the way this is opening up to me, and thanks to my teachers such as I'm thinking of Ruth King, Arena Wiseman, Joanna Macy, many others. The way the practice is opening up to me that feels right is that it seems like I spent a lot of time attending to this kind of system here of the psychophysical, kind of heart, mind, body system, that little location like this. Yeah. And I think also because of the notion of anatta, not self, and this becoming more understood and felt, and it seems like it's opening up to any system, really. My kind of conclusion these days, or field of interest, is, wow, any system that is alive and dynamic, like be it just me or us two, or the community I'm in within the retreat, or the community, my city, as my neighborhood, or at any level, the earth we live on. These are all alive systems that can produce fear and suffering and ease and well-being. They can enhance life, and they can also shut down life or make it difficult. And so it seems wise and appropriate to give as much care to any system that I'm part of. They all have in common to not be personal. They all have in common that they can create hardship, and they can create freedom or protection, and so it feels more and more, and as a teacher, that that not only for my own practice, but again as a teacher in the community, that it's my responsibility to wake up to that. And so to apply my equanimous, careful, curious, loving attention to any of the systems that are in action. So as a white male, I have a lot to wake up to, the ways I participate in systems, and I'm privileged, or the way I create oppression or support it, or by my inaction, or by my blindness, or unconsciousness. And so it feels extremely important that I bring as much care to these. And so part of my contemplative art afternoon might be to actually read articles, or stop and try to kind of extend my understanding, like like open the field of my consciousness in these ways. Often it also happens in life, in action. I'm lucky enough to be surrounded by people who have much more awareness than me, and they can point things out, things that I do or not do, but also things that are seen, dynamics, in the systems that. And so I try to pay a lot of attention when these things are brought up, to actually really, bring the best qualities, the best factors of mind available to actually, there's something that tells me, Pascal, tune in now. Really tune in. There's something that needs to be seen here, that you really, it's urgent that you gain access to this.
Is that like an intuition, or is that like something that you're trying to work on? And how do you know? Like, it feels like the world's so big, the problems are so big, and how do you know where to start?
I don't know, but I know that paying attention has been always, paying careful, honest attention has been working in so many ways for me. Why would it not work, you know? So slow down. When I read some of the news, especially right now in this country, in the United States, you know, it's in a way it's right in your face, you know, like it's there every day in the news. There's somebody's talking to us about inequality and violence and you know, and privilege, and so to really pay attention, and again, especially as a white person, a white male, to not fall into denial, reactivity, but to me, it's really bring the best qualities of mind that we develop in this practice, paying careful, honest attention to see how. You know, suffering is being created. What are the conditions? You know.
And are you starting to bring these topics into your Dharma talks?
Yeah.
Start getting conversations around these things.
Yeah, I want to, and I feel it's my responsibility, and I try to how to say that? It's I owe this to my society, to my community, and even if I do it absolutely imperfectly with so much unconsciousness still, and those are all no good reason to not speak up. You know, we actually can't. And again, all my gratitude, and I owe all of this to my fellow practitioners who are awake to this and are actually speaking up. And very courageously, at many of them at a big cost, you know, the cost of their own privilege and health, and you know, and so
it's nice that from your personal practice that's very contemplative, this like responsibility for your community has come out of that practice, just from noticing, using attention, and seeing all these relationships and how far they extend. That's a beautiful insight. Yeah.
And at the same time, I think it's important to say, anyway, the way I hold it is, and I'm way behind. You know, not just personally, but we are way behind. Like, I wouldn't want to make it sound like, oh, Pascal is, you know, like, no. Yeah. Like, Pascal is doing the minimum work.
And we're all works in progress.
Yeah, exact. And like, it's we really have to catch up here. Yeah. That's my sense.
It's really nice. I want to thank you for your time.
Thanks.
It's really beautiful.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
So I hope you enjoyed the conversation with Pascal. Next week we've got a fun interview for you. We've got Jerry Stribling coming on the podcast. Jerry's the author of a book called Buddhism for Dudes. He's got some great stories, and it's a fun interview. So please join us next week for Jerry Stribling, and we'll talk about Buddhism for Dudes.
My original destination had been Pakistan. We went in 2002 in the winter. And there were going to be a lot of Afghani children who were displaced during our initial invasion. So I was going to go and help set up schools on the Afghani-Pakistani frontier. Well, it got real too dangerous to do that. So I figured there are other nasty little wars in Asia that I could, maybe be a help. And I ended up in Sri Lanka. It was pretty fortuitous. I had no intention of studying Buddhism. I was curious about it, but I had the opportunity to, and if you want to talk about karma, you can, but I studied with three of the most eminent Buddhist theologians in the country.